All right, we're rolling. So we are in the very last chapter of 1 Samuel tonight. It's been a long book, 31 chapters. A lot's happened, and a lot of lives we've seen, ups and downs. This is actually truly, if you think about it, we're not finished with the story because 1 and 2 Samuel was originally one story. It was one book. Only later on was it split into two separate books. So really this is more of the climax of the entire story. The climax being the conclusion, the end of Saul's life and his reign as Israel's first king, and it is giving way to David's years as king. And, you know, we've had a little bit of David in 1 Samuel as well, and that's kind of called the preparation years, and we've really seen God preparing him during that time to be a wonderful king for the nation of Israel. We've seen characters such as Eli and his ministry, and he introduces us to Samuel, and we were able to, through the author's very creative way of bouncing back and forth, contrasting the two figures in their ministries. And then Samuel introduces us to Saul, first king, and he also introduces us to David, who's anointed to be the second king. And the author again bounces back and forth between the two so that we can contrast two men who are in leadership positions and how differently they take that role that God has given them, how differently they submit, or lack of submission in Saul's case, to God's highest authority over his people. And so I really think that 1 Samuel, really the biggest gift that it gives us is Saul's life in its entirety. Obviously we don't see him as he's born, but from that moment that he enters into Israel's history as a person of authority, a person that God has anointed, and you can see truly what it looks like, a life that refuses to submit to God's will, a life that refuses to listen to God. So it's a bit of a negative lesson, but it is a powerful lesson nonetheless. And so that we're coming to the end now, and we're seeing truly the end of what that looks like. So let's go ahead with chapter 31, and I'll just read the first 6 verses here. Now the Philistines were fighting against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell slain on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines overtook Saul and his sons, and the Philistines killed Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchishua, the sons of Saul. And the battle went heavily against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was badly wounded by the archers. And then Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and pierce me through with it. Otherwise these uncircumcised will come and pierce me through and make sport of me." But his armor-bearer would not, for he was greatly afraid. So Saul took his sword and fell on it. And when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell on his sword and died with him. Thus Saul died with his 3 sons, his armor-bearer, and all his men on that day together. 6 little verses here. That's all we're given. And what a sad and tragic conclusion for Saul. It's been leading up. You know that God is going to take out his servant Saul at some point, because that was promised by God through Samuel back in chapters 13 and 15, both times that Saul directly disobeyed God's word, and God gave him a promise that your time is coming up where you are done. And so 6 verses, that's all it took. Pretty sad. But the first verse just reminds us kind of where we're at. It kind of picks up from chapter 28. Remember, 28 is when Saul went and consulted with that spirit medium regarding the battle with the Philistines. And in the end, when he leaves the witch's house, he goes back to camp. And so that's kind of picking up straight from that point. The Philistines are fighting against Israel yet again. And instead of winning the battle as they should, instead they are losing the battle, and Israel's fleeing And as they are fleeing, men are dying, and that includes Saul and his sons. And it actually names the sons, and the first to be named is Jonathan. And I think that that's a important thing, simply because he's the firstborn. He would have been heir to the throne if it wasn't for David to be anointed as the next king. But Jonathan was really an incredible figure. He was a joy to read about. His passion and zeal for God and for God's commands matched that of David's, which is why they were like kindred spirits. He really believed in the promise in Deuteronomy, and I had looked it up earlier. Let me see if I can find it again. Right, here we go. Deuteronomy 11. Really, the whole thing talks about obedience to God, but specifically, I'll read verse 8. I don't know, I'll figure out where to stop. You shall therefore keep every commandment which I am commanding you today, so that you may be strong and go in and possess the land into which you are about to cross and possess it, so that you may prolong your days on the land, which the Lord swore to your fathers to give to them and to their descendants, a land flowing with milk and honey. For the land into which you are entering to possess it is not like the land of Egypt from which you came, where you used to sow your seed and water it with your foot like a vegetable garden. But the land, hold on. I had to skip down, my bad. It shall come about. Sorry, where was that verse? I had a verse. Wow. One of these verses talks about if you obey God's commands, that God will give you prosperity in the land. That was the point of the verse. Sorry, I found the wrong verse. But the verse was basically saying, if you obey God's commands, because that was what Moses was trying to drive home with Deuteronomy, was obey God's commands. Obey God's commands. You are going to forget, because Moses knew from all the time he was with those Israelites, they kept forgetting. He's saying, obey God's commands, because that is the key to God's blessing in the land. And Jonathan understood that. Jonathan understood that the Philistines were an enemy against God's blessing. And the true way of getting to that was to obey God's command, to go against those people. And that's exactly what he did. And also with David, and those two were very much on the same page. They had the same heart when it came to that. So we've seen the wonderful life of Jonathan and how he was very faithful and loyal to his father. Think about that. He could have been like, Dad, you're insane. I am out of here. Or tried to usurp his father because his father was going crazy. Or he could have done a number of things. But in all the things that he did, none of it was for personal gain or political power of any kind. He stood faithfully and loyally by his father's side, knowing full well that his father did not truly have that throne forever, and that he did not have that throne after his father. He knew all that. He was very aware that David was the next king, and he was fully supportive of God's will in that. So Jonathan was a wonderful figure to see in this book. Saul has other sons, Abinadab, Malchishua. There is a fourth son that's not named, so he must not have been in this battle. Not sure why. His name was Ishbosheth, and he's going to come up in a couple chapters in 2 Samuel. We'll see him for a short bit. Not sure why he wasn't there. I could not find a clear answer on that. Actually, Ishbosheth, It's going to be a fun one. Ishbosheth it's just kind of this random guy that kind of just shows up. He's the son of Saul, and then he's gone. So I don't know. I don't have a lot of answers for him, but that's okay. And then finally, we're told of Saul's death, and we have some more details on his death than we do the son's. So he's badly wounded by the archers in the battle, and he says to his armor bearer to draw your sword and pierce me through. And the reason why is this: he knows what the Philistines are capable of, and he knows what kind of cruel and torturous things they're going to do to him. It was just common practice, no matter what nation you were of, to kind of do that to whatever nation you're conquering, as a way of making sport, as a way of humiliating them and shaming them, as a way of kind of taunting to everyone else. Look at, they thought they were so great, and look at them now. That was the whole point, and that was very common in that time. If you remember, David does this with the 200 foreskins of the Philistines that he had to bring to King Saul. That was typical of that time. Gross, but typical. If you remember decapitation, that's what David did to Goliath when he slayed Goliath. He cut off the head, and he brought the head as a trophy to King Saul. So all of those things are very much common at this time, and Saul knows that is coming, for something is coming for him, and he doesn't want to endure that. He wants out. And so he asks his armor bearer to take him out. But his armor bearer is afraid. Perhaps he is afraid of laying a hand on God's anointed one. Perhaps he's afraid of people like retaliating against him for taking out the king. There's a lot of reasons why he would be afraid in that moment of fulfilling that request. I know I would be afraid if I were him. This guy's not in a good position anyway, really. And so Saul does the only thing that he can do in that moment, and he falls on his own sword. He commits suicide. He just couldn't cope with it any longer. He was truly at the end of the rope of his life, and he did not want to continue anymore. And if you remember, back at the very beginning of the book, that Eli died in a similar way to Saul. We see similarities. Both was when there was a battle with Israel against the Philistines. When Eli, he's the high priest, and he's sitting on the stool at the gate, and he is waiting to hear news, and he's practically blind at this time. And a messenger comes running with news that Israel has been defeated, that Eli's sons are dead, and that the Ark of the Covenant has been taken by the Philistines. And that was all it took for Eli to fall over and to die. It's very, very similar to Saul. Israel's defeated in battle. The presence of God has left him, like the presence of God left Israel with the Ark of the Covenant being taken. And he falls. He too falls and dies. So the author has purposefully guided us through these contrasts and connects these certain elements of the story. And we can draw these conclusions here. Both Eli and Saul had a hard time hearing God. If you remember earlier, when there's Eli and there's little boy Samuel, and God is calling to Samuel, and Samuel thinks that it's Eli. Eli doesn't hear at all. And he finally realizes, oh, God is calling Samuel in this moment. Eli hasn't heard a word from God in a very long time. In fact, the only word that both Saul and Eli hear from God, that they actually truly hear, is judgment. That is the word that they receive. Judgment on Eli's house, judgment on Saul's house. And so we have these literary comparisons to make connections between this unfaithful priest and an unfaithful king. Both of them actually reigned for 40 years. Well, not reigned in the priests, but served in their positions for 40 years before their death. So the author is truly giving us this connection here. Any thoughts on that? So we can continue. Oh, go ahead.
Just thinking that it's interesting that Saul didn't wait for God to end his life.
Mhm.
Once again took charge
Mhm.
and ended his own life.
Yeah, you're so
To the
right.
very end.
Yep.
Not pleasing to God
Right,
to do that.
right. Not God's will,
No.
but accomplished God's promise nonetheless. Yeah, you're so right about that. So we have this poor armor bearer, and he sees that Saul is dead, and he too also has one option truly before him. Not really, but that's the way he sees it, because at this point his life is effectively ended. It's very possible that there is a expectation on armor bearers. If you fail to protect the king's life, your life is as good as dead as well. That's a very real possibility. Even if for some reason that wasn't what would have happened, his life as he knew it would have been worthless at that point. You know, he's definitely not going to be an armor bearer ever again. No one's going to take that guy on. You know, he has nothing for him. And so he also sees that the only way out is to kill himself. And so Saul, once again, we see how the lives of people who reject God often pull others in to their destruction. It's like this vortex thing. It's never just the one person that's affected. Other people are always affected by one person's choices and actions. And I think that goes both ways, blessings or curses. And so Saul's curse not only affected himself and destroyed his own life, but it affected other people. His sons died. His armor bearer died. A whole slew of Israelites are slain on the hillside. The kingdom is struggling, and now Philistines have gained quite a bit of Israel's territory in that process. There's a lot that was lost at this moment, and it wasn't just one man's life. It was a lot more than that. And so the next day, we see verse 8. Sorry, I can keep reading 7 to the end here. When the men of Israel who were on the other side of the valley, with those who were beyond the Jordan, saw that the men of Israel had fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they abandoned the cities and fled. Then the Philistines came and lived in them. So there's that territory that was lost that day. And it came about on the next day when the Philistines came to strip the slain that they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. They cut off his head and stripped off his weapons and sent them throughout the land of the Philistines to carry the good news to the house of their idols and to the people. They put his weapons in the temple of Ashtaroth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. Now when the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men rose and walked all night and took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Bethshan. They came to Jabesh and burned them there, and they took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree at Jabesh and fasted 7 days. Okay, so the surrounding areas, and I'm not sure which towns it was, but here is the battleground area. Shunem, I believe, is where the Philistines' camp was located. I think the place where Israelites were camped is not on this map, but it's around this Jezreel area. Mount Gilboa here is where Saul was slain. Endor, that's where Saul went to go consult with the spirit medium. So it's all within this area here. So my guess is a bit of this area is what was lost. Here's Jabesh Gilead. And if you'll notice, it's on the other side of the Jordan River. I can't remember now how many miles it was. Did I write that down? 15 miles is what they would have walked-ish from where they were located over to where Bethshan would be, which would be kind of in that same area. It was just, Bethshan would have been one of the small towns, small communities within the battle area, somewhere where people would see. That's the point, right? When you're nailing bodies to a wall, that's the point, is for it to be seen. So, unfortunately, Saul's shame continues in his death, and we see that here. The Philistines, they're circulating the news of Saul's demise all throughout the land. This was big. The death of the king, the very king of Israel, and all of his sons. That's pretty big. Philistia and Israel, they've been enemies for pretty much ever since Israel stepped foot into the land with Joshua. So they've been enemies for quite a long time. And, Saul was known as a valiant warrior. He had a lot of cowardly moments, but in his lifetime, in his 40 years of reign, he did a lot of wonderful battles. And he was a very valiant warrior, and he was known for that. So this was a big deal. And of course, they found multiple ways to shame him in his death. His armor is displayed in the Temple of Ashtaroth. Now, that was the Philistines' female deity. Then you have his body that's nailed to the walls of the city of Bethshan. And then 1 Chronicles 10 actually tells us that his head was displayed in the Temple of Dagon. And that would have been the male deity. And if you remember, way back in 1 Samuel, when the ark was taken there, when the Philistines captured the ark and they took it to their Temple of Dagon, what happened to Dagon? Yeah, he fell over and the head came off. I have no idea if that thing is still headless at this point. There was some commentators that speculated they truly put Saul's head on top as the head. I have no idea. I personally don't think, this is me guessing, I don't think that they would have waited that long to replace the head of their god, And also I think that would have almost been like a shameful thing to do there to your god idol. So I don't think so personally, but whatever. It's still a very humiliating thing for Saul, for his head to be in a house of idols. 1 Samuel begins in the house of God, and it ends in the house of idols. What a contrast there. We can read 1 Chronicles 10 really quick. It gives us a little more information. It basically says what's here, but then it gives us a little more. Okay. Now the Philistines fought against Israel. This is, chapter 10, verse 1. And the men of Israel fled before the Philistines and fell slain on Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines closely pursued Saul and his sons, and the Philistines struck down Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua, the sons of Saul. The battle became heavy against Saul, and the archers overtook him, and he was wounded by the archers. And Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and thrust me through with it, otherwise these uncircumcised will come and abuse me." But his armor-bearer would not, for he was greatly afraid. Therefore Saul took his sword and fell on it. When his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he likewise fell on his sword and died. Thus Saul died with his 3 sons, and all those of his house died together. When all the men of Israel who were in the valley saw that they had fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they forsook their cities and fled, and the Philistines came and lived in them. And it came about the next day, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, that they found Saul and his sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. They stripped him and took his head and his armor, and sent messengers around the land of the Philistines to carry the good news to their idols and to the people. They put his armor in the house of their gods and fastened his head in the house of Dagon. And then we come to Jabesh Gilead. When all Jabesh Gilead heard all that the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men arose and took away the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons and brought them to Jabesh. They buried their bones under the oak in Jabesh and fasted 7 days. So Saul died for his trespasses which he committed against the Lord, because of the word of the Lord which he did not keep, and also because he asked counsel of a medium, making inquiry of it. And he did not inquire of the Lord. Therefore he killed him and turned the kingdom to David, the son of Jesse. there's a very clear final word on the life and death of Saul. That he died because of the trespasses which he committed. I truly think that Saul could have gone down a different path entirely. I think that God was still raising up David with a purpose, but Saul had the option. Saul was a free will spirit, just like you and me, where he could choose the path that he is going on. And he chose the path of the fool over the path of the wise. And that foolish path that he went down brought about a lot of destruction in not only his life, but in the life of many around him.
So 28:6 says, when Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him, either by dreams or by Urim or by prophets. So then he goes to the sorceress.
Yes.
So he did inquire of God for what? Verse 14 in Chronicles 10, did not inquire of the Lord. So is the case that he did inquire that time. Is it that it was too late?
I think it's a couple of things. I think that it's the way of Romans 1. How does God say that he deals with people who reject him and refuse him? He gives them over to their own path, to the path of destruction that they are set on going on. And I think Saul was just way down that path. However, I do think that there is another measure here, because there's one other person that I can think of, not the only person, but a figure that I can think of who is very far down the path of wickedness, and yet still God heard him, and that's Ahab. And when he's this wicked king of Israel during the time of Elijah, remember Derek's sermons on that, and yet there was a moment where Ahab was very troubled by the pronouncement of judgment from God, and he humbled himself, and he repented, and he had sorrow, and God heard him, and he saw the genuineness of his heart in that moment, and he put off the judgment for a time. And
didn't Saul do that a number of times? He would come back to God and go, oh, that's right.
I don't know that that was genuine. I can't say, but when I'm reading it, I see a man who is sorry about the consequences. Samuel would say, you've disobeyed God. And God says, this. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry I've sin, But then over and over, it was Saul saying, no, I think I know better. Nope, I think I know what to, I'm doing this instead. And then when there was, judgment, I'm sorry. No. Remember, he even tried to get Samuel to come back with him to be seen together to all the leaders of Israel so that it would look like everything was still fine. He had this way of looking godly on the outside, but I think on the inside, that wasn't his concern. He wasn't genuinely pursuing that. That's the conclusion that I take from this. Because I think that if he truly did repent and ask God, what am I supposed to do? With the intent of following what God told him to do, I think God would have answered him. I think the only reason that God didn't answer him is because he knew that Saul wasn't actually wanting a word from God. He wanted to hear what he wanted to hear, that God's going to be with him in this battle.
We all kind of want to hear what we want to hear.
We do, yeah. We're all guilty of a little Saul in our lives. Yeah. Yeah. Good question. So we have these men of Jabesh Gilead, and that might seem really random. Why did these men walk all night to go take down the mutilated bodies of Saul and his sons and perform a little funeral service for them? And if you remember way back in the book of 1 Samuel, Jabesh Gilead are some of the first people that Saul actually goes to help in his time with Israel. I think it's before he's even like truly king. He was anointed, but I don't think he was truly king yet. And he already was going to the aid of people. And it was Jabesh Gilead. They were being victims of Philistine raids, I believe, if I remember correctly. And so perhaps it's because these men remember what Saul did for them all those years ago. And so they walk all night. The trek's no small thing. They walk all night, 15 miles, and they cross the Jordan River, and they're going into what's now Philistine territory to sneak and take down these bodies. That couldn't have been an easy thing. But they did. They retrieved the bodies. They retreated them back to Jabesh. They held a ceremony for them, first burning the bodies and then burying the bones. Not sure why they burned the bodies first before. There's some speculation on that, whether the bodies were just so badly mutilated or perhaps there was disease, because we're not sure on the timing, from what point from dying to Jabesh Gilead men actually getting the bodies. Not sure. Perhaps that was like a typical funeral thing, almost like a funeral pyre, where they put the bodies up and they light them on fire and that kind of thing. No idea. But afterwards, where were the bones buried? What does it say? Under a tamarisk tree. You guys remember what else happened with the tamarisk tree in Saul's life?
He used to sit under it.
He sat under it, and he would hold court under it. And we're in the recording that we have of him under the tamarisk tree. What was he doing? Do you remember? He was accusing his men of which one of you is giving information to David, or which one of you is secretly following him. He was accusing them of treason. This was where Saul began his, well, maybe not began, but really started acting on the paranoia that was within him. It was a big moment of his decline, where he's not just harboring those feelings inside or thinking on them, he's acting on them. He's accusing his own men of Benjamin. Remember, he said, "Oh, you old men of Benjamin, which one of you is helping the son of Jesse?" Remember, that was that insulting way of referring to someone. And yeah, that was that moment where he really began much of the paranoia-driven reign on the throne. And it's now under a tamarisk tree where his body is laid to rest. The paranoia begins and ends with the tamarisk tree.
So how are their bones left when they've been burned? Bones don't burn?
I think it's a higher heat.
Yeah, it's a
Like
much higher
cremation,
heat.
It requires a much higher heat for a longer period of time than just burning.
Okay.
I watch too many true crime shows, but
It's not because you understand the medical.
it's the physiology part. I mean, that's probably part of it, but I find it interesting.
That.
Lynn has something she's not going to share. She said.
So, Then we see these men of Jabesh, men of Israel. They are fasting for 7 days to mourn King Saul, and that sounds really nice, except when you realize that the typical amount of time for mourning was 30 days. 30 days was the customary amount of time for mourning, and so truly, I think that Israel was just, it was this sigh of relief that it was done, in a sense. Give him some time, mourn for him, moving on. So, lessons from Saul's life. What are some things that we can learn from the life of Saul?
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Good one, Sarah. Put that at the top.
Away with words.
Yes, you do. So clear and concise.
God calls you to do something, then listen.
Yeah, listen.
Listen to everything. Don't just, okay, I'm king now.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you're right. The cherry picking of what I want to listen to and don't want to listen to. Yeah.
And maybe it took him a long time to learn. You said 40 years.
Clearly, he still wasn't learning towards the end, unfortunately. But sometimes it takes us that long to realize, oh, when I don't listen, I bring on bad things, or, that kind of thing. It doesn't go well for me. Yeah.
His disobedience truly was deadly.
It truly
His
was.
Disobedience, God just won't tolerate it.
And isn't that an interesting thing to think on? Because a lot of times nowadays we try to soften that. We try to soften consequences. That's something that when I go against God's will, that's my choice. I get to choose that, and it'll just be. But it's so much, like you said, deadlier than that, or the opportunity for it to be deadlier. Saul was king over a nation, anointed by God. He had a great responsibility on his shoulders. But then, likewise, God's anointed us, in a sense, to be his image bearers, to be his name to the peoples of the earth, to maybe lead in the ministry, or to lead in your home as wife and mother, or to whatever it is that God has placed you in. And then you realize, the effect that I have in people's lives, just like Saul's did in the lives of others. Yeah, good thought there.
I think that the parallel between Jonathan's life is absolutely terrifying, to be honest, because like you said, it destroyed even a good man, his entire life, and that's terrifying and sad, because if we align it's just goes to show, if we align ourselves with these evil people, then we may also fall into their destruction as well, even if we're trying to do what we think is right.
Yeah. Jonathan's story is really a beautiful one and a hard one at the same time, because he's a godly man, and yet he shares a tragic demise with his father. But I don't think that, like you said, it's not because of something he did. It's the effects of his father that are on him. However, I do think, though, that it was necessary for him to die in that moment, because the nation would have tried to make him king, any of the sons king. And that's what we're going to see with Ishbosheth. So, a necessary thing.
I think it's a good reminder to his life, even if we do follow what God says, it might not always work out the way we want it to.
Might not have that
And it
happy
might not be happy
ending.
and good.
Yeah. Yeah, and we see that in the lives of a lot of martyrs, missionaries around the world. But that still does not negate our calling to obedience. That's the hard part about it, isn't it?
I think it's easy to think, well, I'm not being obedient because bad things are happening. Like, you know, I must be doing
It
the right
is.
thing.
Mhm.
But that's
Yes.
always not always true. Yeah, yeah. Like, why is this happening to me?
Yeah, yeah, that is an easy thing to do. I guess that's
What do
where.
I need to do for things to go well, God?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
It's,
I
Yeah.
really need things to go well.
Yeah,
Just tell me what to do.
yeah. Yeah.
I was reading in a devotional I do every day, and of course, I can't remember all of it right now. I usually reread it, but it was about not comparing ourselves to anyone. And this was not comparing yourself to anyone in the church, any other believer. And it just made me think of, well, now it made me think of, not when I was doing the devotional, of Saul comparing himself with David.
Mm.
I mean, he was very angry at David for getting that little ditty they sang about him, which
Yeah.
made Saul very upset. It just made him more hateful toward David and made him go crazy about killing him.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed the devotional. I'm not comparing yourself to anyone. And of course, now I'm going to go home and reread it.
Yes.
And I might write something down about it.
Good.
And I might remember it.
Yeah, the jealousy really quickly overtook him. That was one of the first things that we saw with Saul and David, was the jealousy. I think that that's really interesting with his life, how we saw it started so small. That little song, you know, one little thing here, and it snowballed and snowballed and grew to these wild proportions where all of a sudden now he's trying to kill everybody. He's trying to kill David. He's tried to kill Jonathan at one point. He is accusing his men of treason. He killed all the priests at Nob. Yeah, it's amazing how it just, and you're looking back and you're going, how did it get to this point? Oh, there was one little seed of jealousy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And pride. Mhm. I think another lesson that we can learn is Saul, he really kept up the religious practices without ever truly knowing God. He made sure he did the sacrifices. He made sure that he obeyed God's command to take out all of the mediums and you know, those kinds of things. Like he was checking things off, making sure that he kept up on those religious practices. But then at the heart of it, we see that he wasn't really interested in truly obeying God. That wasn't the point for him, because clearly not all the mediums were gone. And not only were they able to find one, it was easy to find one. He asks his men, anybody know where to find one? And they're like, yeah, there's one down the street, you know, like that was too easy. He wasn't truly caring about what God said was good and what wasn't good for Israel when he did that. When God told him to destroy Amalek, remember the Amalekites, destroy them because this is their judgment I have placed on them for what they did to Israel when they were coming out of Egypt. And don't let anything live. And there was a purpose in that, and there was good in that. And Saul should have trusted God in that and obeyed. But he didn't. And he goes, okay, yeah, I destroyed them, I defeated them, but I'm also going to keep some of the best of everything, because why let it go to waste? You know, we worked really hard for that. That should be ours. We deserve spoils.
Did he keep the king too?
Sorry?
Did he keep the king too?
It kept the king too. Yeah. So we see that he really lacked trusting God. And we see that his lack of trusting God is from a lack of satisfaction in God. He was never truly content in that. And it was always, oh sure, I'll obey you, God, but then I'm also going to keep all these spoils, or, those kinds of things. Yeah. And the other thing I think that was really big for him was he never really learned how to repent, kind of like we were talking about. Did you notice a lot of times when Samuel would say, you didn't listen, you disobeyed, you did the wrong thing there, he would point the finger of blame. Almost every time. He's like, well, these people. Or it was this. You didn't come, Samuel, and then the people were leaving me, and I had to do something. It was always finger of blame. He was always the victim. He never really admitted that he was truly wrong in what he did. That's a very scary thing that's really easy for us to do. I think that's super easy for us to do. I see it in my own children. And as the parent, I'm looking at him like, son, I'm telling you, that was a wrong choice, And he's like, no. But I justified it. I had a good reason for it. Oh, and how easy is that for us to do? We always think we're right.
I wonder if Saul really feared God. I mean, with everything you just listed,
Yeah,
and he did it over and over and over.
right.
I mean, most of the time back then, people had a fear of God's wrath. He didn't seem to be afraid of that, even though he's suffered quite a bit.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, David feared God, that's respectfully feared God.
Yeah,
That's why we believe he kept Saul alive when he had chances to kill him, because
Right.
he was God's anointed.
right.
But
And then contrast that with Saul, who had no problem slaying an entire village of priests, even though they were anointed by God.
didn't Saul take one of his daughters back from David?
Yeah, when David fled, he gave Michal to some other guy. That part is actually kind of, this is bad, but this is kind of hilarious. In 2 Samuel, sorry, I'm gonna spoil it. David wants her back. He requests her back. And so the poor woman is taken from her husband and brought back to David, and the whole time she's traveling to David, the husband's following behind crying. Until he gets to a certain point and they're like, buddy, you gotta go back. And they send him back. Sorry, I thought it was kind of funny. Oh, but yeah, yes. Yeah, that was the whole thing too.
Which I think a lot of people in the world today probably don't fear God,
No,
or they wouldn't make some of the choices,
right.
us included, but others more so.
Oh, okay.
There's a difference.
There's a difference.
I think that Saul feared losing the things that he had, that were given to, he forgot that they were given to him by God.
I agree.
Yeah, he was a nobody.
He was. Well, sort of. He was well respected within his tribe.
Yeah.
He was,
But he
tall,
didn't
dark,
have-
and handsome and all that kind of thing. He had a lot going for him, but remember, he was the people's choice.
Yeah.
But truly, before he was anointed, there was nothing special about him as far as,
He didn't have any skills, remember
well, he chased donkeys, remember? Although we never found him, so maybe he wasn't so good at that.
he found out that they went back, remember? He did ask about the donkeys.
I loved those chapters. That was hilarious. Chasing donkeys across the hillside.
He seemed to have a good heart at one time, though.
Yes. And truly, I don't think that God would have anointed him and put his spirit in him without a heart that was truly had the opportunity for good, and he did do good. And that's something that we'll see in 2 Samuel 1. David has this song that he sings, and it's regarding Saul and his sons that are slain. And sorry, again, spoiling it, but he says all these wonderful things about Saul. He had the opportunity to just be like, that guy was the worst. But he didn't. He said all these wonderful things, and it's because it's true. Saul had a lot of really good qualities. He had a heart that was truly had the opportunity to do wonderful things in submission to God with the authority that God gave him.
Doing it with God.
Doing it
instead
with
of
God.
on
Yes.
his own.
Yes. Exactly. Yes. But like
And
Lynn
ended
said,
well.
what's that?
I mean, he started out well,
Yes.
but didn't end well.
Didn't end well.
That happens to a lot of us.
And I think that the true spiritual and mental deterioration began when he set himself against God, against God's will. He may not have realized it at the time, but that's truly what he was doing. Cherry picking what he was going to obey out of God's command. Making foolish orders. The jealousy and the pride that just started to drive him and led to this true paranoid craze. It started out he started out in a good spot, and then, yeah. And like Lynn said, where he wanted to keep the things that he had, not realizing that that was given to him by God. Yeah. I think we can all take that lesson there.
Instead of God gives, God takes away.
Right.
Open-handed.
Yeah. Yep.
I close my fist on just about every good thing that happens.
That's it's a reflexive thing for us, I think, with our nature. You know, oh, that's good, I want to keep it. Don't let that slip through.
Or don't share.
Or don't share. Yes.
As a kid.
Yes. It's very reflexive of us, yeah. So, I'm going to end here. I think the big thing that we can kind of take from 1 Samuel is we see a true, clear examples of obedience and disobedience and the blessing and the curses that God promised on Israel. And that's set an example through the life of Saul and the life of David, as we've seen thus far. But there's a lot of wonderful lessons to be learned, hard lessons, not very fun lessons, but good lessons nonetheless in the life of Saul. And then starting, not next week, but the week after, we'll start 2 Samuel, and we'll really get into David's reign as the second king of Israel. Any last thoughts or questions? Tracy, would you mind praying for us tonight? Thank you.
Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this beautiful day. We thank you for the ladies that are gathered here to learn about the life of Saul and David and Jonathan, and we thank you for all the time that Rochelle puts into it. And Father, as we learn about this, we think about all of the things that Saul did wrong and the things he did right. And Father, I pray that each of us will learn obedience and repentance and take away some of the good things that Saul did too, and the gifts that God gave him, Father. And may we make it pertinent in our own lives. May you be with Rochelle and her family as they travel until we get together again the following week. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you.